Hello and welcome to the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association's Reasonable Doubt. I am your host, Murray Newman, and with me tonight, as always, is our Treasurer Extraordinaire, Justin Harris.
Hey, Treasurer, yeah, that's me.
You do that sometimes.
I got to pay a bill after the show.
Yeah, it's your side hustle.
Yeah, thanks.
We are very excited to have a great show for you tonight. We have Democratic candidate for District Attorney, Teare, who is with us tonight again. We're very excited. Thanks for joining us.
I'm excited to be here every time I get to come on.
Well, and before we get into to talk to you about the issues, I do want to make it very clear to the audience that our initial concept of this show was to invite not just Sean, but also Republican candidate Dan Simons. Justin and I both spoke with Dan personally. He expressed some concerns that he would not be the favorite person on here. We both told him that we plan to talk about the issues, show no favoritism, and if we did, it would reflect more poorly on us. But ultimately, he said that he did not want to participate. And so it kind of falls under the category of be here, be talked about, I guess. But we really want to focus on the issues.
Same.
So we had you here in, I guess it would have been March, right before the primary election against Kim Ogg.
It was February, the very end of February.
Okay. It really has been a lifetime.
God, trust me, I know.
You need a nap, man. You need a nap.
Well, November 6th, I'm going to sleep.
I was just thinking about it because I have a lot of questions I want to talk to you about. I'm sure Justin does as well. And I was thinking, these are two very different layouts of a competition for you, because you in the primary you were very much just running against someone who had given you a lot of material as why she should no longer be DA.
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
And with Dan, although his tenure at the DA's office was not very long, he doesn't give you a whole lot to attack other than what he's actually saying on the campaign trail. So do you find it a different strategy as far as how you're handling things?
I think with Kim, you had a body of work to talk about, and you're right. She gave a lot of places to criticize. With Dan, there is no body of work. He's, other than actually some poor evaluations. There's just no experience. It's like apples to oranges. He's never tried anything that we would categorize as the old 3 Gs, right? He's never presented DNA evidence. He's never met with and presented a child victim. He's never presented an outcry witness. He's never even reviewed a forensic interview from the CAC. So he just doesn't have the body of work to talk about. And so quite frankly, this general election is just talking to the voters about what my vision of the DA's office is going to be.
And how important do you think it is to have someone that's got more experience? Because you'll see the politicians saying, well, it's not like the elected DA is going to appear in court and try cases. What do you say to those people?
Well, I am going to try a case a year. We talked about that in February. I don't think it's possible to do more than that.
Yeah.
And the experience in actually handling cases probably isn't as important as people out there that aren't in the know would think. The experience of supervising people, of actually being in an organization that large, dealing with portions of, if not the whole budget, learning how to liaise with other stakeholders, I think that's what separates me from my opponent in a much more meaningful way. I've supervised well over 100 of the prosecutors that are still there. At any given time, I was the supervisor in charge of evaluations and promotions for 40 to 50 prosecutors. I was in charge of 2 separate divisions' budgets for 6 years. So that's what separates me. That's why I think I'm kind of uniquely positioned in the history of that office to step in and actually run it efficiently from day one, as opposed to my opponent who in his entire legal career has never supervised more than 2 people.
Well, and as much as I think that is certainly important, but I also just kind of find the premise of the idea of you don't have to have that experience to be effective. I just think it's wrong. I think they said that about Pat Lycos in 2008, but you don't ask a shoe salesman to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Right.
You ask soldiers that have come up through the ranks and know what it means. And he's going to have to make some decisions with trial-based knowledge.
Right.
And if he doesn't have it, how does he make them?
And I think internally that's where that matters the most, right? Internally in the morale, in making the people under you trust you, in saying, I need you to try this hard case because I've tried a hard case like that. I need you to sit down with this family and give them some pretty bad news about the case because I've done that. I think that's where that kind of experience really matters.
All right, I don't want to hog the show. What do you got?
No,
what do you got for our guest?
I talked to Dan earlier, and he did express that he had some prior commitments tonight. So I did tell him we'd hold a spot open for him if he wanted to come on at any time tonight. But
Reminds me of when Lorne Michaels tried to get the Beatles to reunite on Saturday Night Live. We got a check for $3,000.
Yeah, there you go. So what are some of the things you are talking to people about? I understand the conversation about experience, and I think we can have that for a long time. But
Sure.
Since you don't have a body of work, as you said, of Dan Simons to go up against, what are you talking to folks about? What are you hearing back from them?
So a few of the things that I'm really excited about starting day one is we're going to make the Domestic Violence Division, what we all affectionately used to call the FCLD, we're going to make it a bureau into itself. Instead of, as every defense attorney and every prosecutor knows, you effectively bifurcate the cases right now. So FCLD, or DVD as it's currently called, handles 35 to 40% of the intimate partner violence cases. The rest of the cases go to the trial bureau. What we see is that the trial bureau cases are handled in a much different way. They're not assessed for high lethality. They're not handled with trauma-informed prosecutors. The social services that they have available to them is much different than FCLD. And so we see the survivors actually get fatigued, and they stop participating in the process. And so we lose those cases almost through attrition before we ever get to trial in a lot of cases. And that is a really negative outcome for the survivors. It's also a negative outcome sometimes for the defendants who don't receive the appropriate rehabilitation before they reintegrate with the family. So we're going to put them all in the same bureau. They're going to be all handled and assessed the same way from the very beginning. They're all going to have the services that those that go to FCLD now have. I think that is going to change the outcomes for a huge percentage of every case that falls into that bureau. So I'm excited about doing that. I'm excited about working with the judiciary in that to create a real domestic violence court. I know that some of the judiciary is excited about that. I have one judge who I am very excited about her potentially coming on the bench. It's a passion of hers. I think she would be the perfect judge to run this court. And it wouldn't be a domestic violence court, at least in my view, like the misdemeanor domestic violence court is right now, which effectively kind of pushes pre-conviction and works through the cases. I'm thinking of a domestic violence court much more akin to the Veterans Court, where it is when someone is already, the case is already disposed either through a diversion, deferred, probation, where you have some intense supervision to really help the family unit, if it is going to reconnect, get together. So I think in conjunction, that's one of those things that I'm really excited about starting day one.
So it would be kind of separate in the sense that like juvenile is separate? Or I'm trying to envision how you were talking about.
So when you think of divisions and bureaus inside the courthouse or inside the DA's office, all the cases still live in a specific court. Mm-hmm. It is just who handles it. Right. So right now, every district court has 3 prosecutors. You have a chief, you have a 2, you have a 3.
Right.
And they handle about 60% of the cases that come into that court. The other 40%, as it is now, is handled by a separate bureau, be it vehicular crimes, be it major offenders, be it the homicide division, be it any other thing. I do like what we're doing here. This is
intentional, absolutely intentional.
But so those are going to be, when you think of FCLD now, or domestic violence, they come in when they have a case.
Yeah.
So this bureau is just going to take all the cases. And so you're going to have to staff it up. You're going to have basically a prosecutor per court. that is going to handle every domestic violence case in that court. And that's going to cut down on the waiting of defense attorneys, where right now you've got
Because you have like one assigned to 4
one
courts.
per floor almost.
Right.
And you've got to coordinate when to get there.
Well, it would make sense if they gave them a floor, but they don't.
Oh, no, they don't.
Like I'm like, what?
It's just trying to
Why don't you just
Yeah,
put them all on the
yeah.
same? I'll give them 4 courts on the same floor,
Right.
Well, and
so
how
that
many
we're
times
not
have you-
waiting 30 minutes.
You've had to reset a case because they're in
They-
trial in
today.
another court, and you
Yeah.
don't, and it just gets punted down the road for 30.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea
Someone
to have a
that drove
resident
in from out of
prosecutor.
Have a
state.
resident prosecutor.
So yeah.
Katie Farrell asks, how do you feel about the current DVD practice of offering one-size-fits-all conditions for all PTI offers?
I think that is just ridiculous.
How do you change that?
Well, you just change it. I mean, that is an edict that has to come down. We've got to change the way that we treat a lot of cases. And we talked about it at length in our probation conditions in February and things like that. Diversion conditions are no different, right? The 16-week BIP for certain cases is not appropriate, right? And so you've got to be able to tailor it more. But I think part of that is the fact that everything is understaffed in domestic violence, and it's through no fault of their own. They're just overstretched. And so we've got to be able to focus on the cases that matter and really tailor conditions of whatever the resolution is to the offense and to the offender.
So Katie has another good question. Who knew?
But
But
he has a lot of good questions.
it's Katie. Yeah, and she's not here. We're safe. You're in a safe space right now.
She's
But,
gonna vote for you too. So.
So Katie, and I wanted to ask, because you've made intake a big part of your
100%.
platform on that, and we actually had a whole show where we talked about where Kim Ogg had kind of thrown down the edict that police officers were to mute their mics when calling intake. So my question, along with Katie's, is kind of a two-part thing. How would you change intake, and how do you feel about Kim's policy that she announced with that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I have them on occasion. I got the good part of that.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we'll start with just fixing intake. The first thing we have to do, Jan 1, is
There is only, by the way, 47 minutes left of the show. So fixing intake is gonna be like 4 or 5
4
hours.
hours.
Yeah.
all right. Well, then should we go part?
They quit interrupting
ju-
Justin.
Just
Yeah,
like
right.
your TikTok, we'll go to part 2.
Right.
two,
Right.
So, first and foremost, January 1st, we go back to exclusively good seasoned prosecutors in intake, right? That is, you are a line prosecutor. That's the only way you work intake. I think in pretty short order, we're going to divide intake into 2 separate but equal things, where you're going to have effectively a patrol division and a detective division, where the patrol division, and those won't be the names, but just
Right.
for our thought
Right.
process,
Practical purposes.
they're the answering the phones, the ones that we always think of.
Right.
And then you have a different caliber. I envision it, you work through the patrol shifts, and the detective bureau shifts are kind of more coveted because you're not on the phone as much. You're handling every tubie. You're handling all the search warrants. You're handling any kind of higher level issues that you need to handle. But one thing that we are unequivocally going back to January 1st is you don't leave that shift until all your cases are screened and until any tubie that walked in that day is done. I mean, that was, you remember, that was unheard of. If you left a stack when you left at midnight or at 8,
Yeah.
it was all over the office within 10
Poor
minutes.
form.
And it
Poor
just
form.
was unacceptable. So this 2,000 cases behind in a backlog of tubies
Will be done.
it has resulted in people dying. Unequivocally, it's resulted in people dying. So we're going back to, we're open 24/7 for officers that want to come in and bring tubies to be done, and they're going to get done that shift. So that's part 1 of fixing intake.
Do you plan on getting rid of the idea of the full-time intake
There
prosecutor?
will not be full-time intake prosecutors.
What about
You're-
the chief, an intake chief?
Absolutely. There will be a division chief.
Okay.
But there won't be a shift chief. The only permanent chief will be when you promote to chief the first time, you're on the desk
The old
from 8 to
days.
5
That's the old school.
until a court opens up. That's it, right? And you rotate through that. no one comes to the DA's office to work in a call center. Any caliber of lawyer that signs up for that is not someone I want working for my office. So we're fixing that. There will not be permanent intake shifts. There'll be a permanent division chief, but there will not be permanent intake shifts. Your second part of your question. I see both sides of it. It is a practice that has been going on since body cams came in.
Sure.
Right? That officers mute the body cams. I have talked through this a lot. I think the very first thing that I would point out is that's not how I'm going to behave with the judiciary, with any of my 86 law enforcement partners. They're not going to be open letters. They're not going to be blasting out, calling people out the way that letter happened. And we all know that was some knee-jerk reaction to a one-off issue. And I 100% understand the officer's desire to record intake right now. You're dealing with, I realize, just with who knows, right? You're dealing with people that you don't trust anymore.
Right.
That was never the case. When officers were calling intake back then, they trusted, they didn't always agree with them, but they trusted that they were getting the right information. Now I don't trust they're getting the right information. So I understand why they want to record it. I also understand in a broad setting, I think it's a great idea for transparency all the way through. But just like intake in the experiment initially, right, where it makes sense to have someone permanent there to experience, in practice, I think it's a bad idea. And without going into a lot of great detail, you've been on the other end of those lines a lot. The candor that I think is necessary between an officer and a prosecutor that they trust results a lot of times in no charges being filed, in things happening the right way at the end of a case. My concern is in the real world practice, officers aren't going to be candid. Officers are going to give what they, without any interpretation or anything, and I think you're going to wind up seeing more charges filed than before if they have to be on the whole time. The other part is I'm not going to dictate to law enforcement what their office's policies are.
Yeah, it just seemed to me, we did practically a whole show. I think Vic was our guest. Vic Vish was our guest on that. It's like, the police officers in their different agencies are going to do what they're going to do, but it was just a bad look, it seemed, for the DA's office to say, turn it off when you're talking to us.
Basically, or we're going to hang the phone up.
Right.
Or we will tell you, like, write this up, bring it in, goodbye.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be a collaborative way to work through that, right? And I think that it's a great issue. I don't know which side I come down on yet. I really don't, because I do want to have as much transparency as possible. I want to be able to give to the defense and to the public in what's always going to be high profile stuff. We did this by the book, right? But
well, if you want to give it and you want to be transparent, you could just say into the camera that officers don't have to turn off their body cams, and y'all won't hang up on them if you're elected DA.
We're not going to hang up on officers. We're not hanging up on officers. But I do want to work with law enforcement and decide what is best for everyone involved. And I'm not convinced it isn't muting the body cams when they're talking through the thought process on whether or not to seek charges. I don't know yet.
Okay. I mean, I've been debating with our mutual friend Lauren Byrne, about recording all of them, just like a 911. Because, and when we had Vic on the show, one of the things that we talked about was experiences where we knew that when the cop called in, he didn't give the DA all the information.
100%.
Right.
And so that is kind of the counterbalance. But you do have to give some grace to an officer that wants to talk through and figure it out, and feel free to do so.
Which goes back to having experienced good prosecutors at intake.
Agreed.
I think that's where we have to get back to. I think we have to start building the trust back. I think we have to get to a point where we've got some mutual respect from law enforcement and us, and then see where we are. And I don't know, maybe everything has changed that much since 2016. We'll find out.
Your turn.
Well, do you have plans for how you start reaching out to that? I mean, have you started doing that on the campaign trail? Can you talk
reaching
about that?
out to law enforcement.
Collaborate with law
Oh, yeah.
enforcement?
I have talked to a majority, I think, of the law enforcement agencies, especially the medium to large ones. And we'll continue to do that before I get elected, much like I've done with the budget office and commissioner's court and the judiciary. It's, I'm in this strange limbo where whatever the outcome November 5th is not enough time to fully prepare to hit the ground running for January 1. But you also can't dictate anything until November 6th. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a kind of hit and miss ability of mine to go sit down with heads of agencies, with the unions, with those kinds of entities. But I've been doing it since March because I think it is so important to let law enforcement know that I'm a career prosecutor. I care about their job and what they do. I want to be a resource. We're not always going to agree, just like the judiciary, just like with the defense bar, but we're going to work together. And I think we're going to be able to do it.
What do you plan to do as far as personnel goes? Like I think we talked back in February. You don't plan to do any kind of like what was it? Like,
Bloody Friday.
Yeah.
Bloody Friday, like Ken did, yeah.
But obviously there'll be some changes.
Yes.
But what do you do? You're going to create this whole new domestic violence division, take some of the cases away. Mm-hmm. Presumably the DA's budget right now is larger than it was 15 years ago when I started, and there were 3 or 4 prosecutors in each court back then. Mm-hmm. There were fewer courts,
right?
But you're going to create this domestic violence court. You're going to create this whole bureau, one prosecutor. Are there going to be 2 prosecutors in each court? What is the DA's office going to look like day to day if you're elected November 5th?
So since 2017, the DA's office budget has gone from 80 million to about 126 million. We are operating, we can't hire people fast enough because of the amount of people that quit at that office. Mm-hmm. There are spots. We're going to need more, but there are more spots than we have right now, people to fill. So what we're going to first do is fill all of our spots. We're going to bring some good people back initially as a nice kind of Band-Aid that's going to infuse a lot of experience. And then we are going to work with the DA's office, with the budget office. I'm bringing in a CFO for the first time ever. I mean, Bert was our CFO, but I'm bringing in a purely chief financial officer who, as long as I win, I've already identified the person that I would like to bring back, who has worked at the county budget office for a number of years, who speaks county budget, who has a background in purely finance. So we're going to identify what we need and then talk to commissioners, not try to indict commissioners. We're going to talk to commissioners about what we need. And I feel very confident that we're going to be funded the way we need to be funded to do all of the things that I want to do. Initially, it's not going to be, with any more personnel than we have, impossible to make the Domestic Violence Bureau. It's just not. I think we've got some overlap. We've got some positions down at intake that are going to come open, at least in their roles. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be able to do it day one.
But is it going to, you eventually create this other bureau.
Right.
Are we going to be waiting longer for those prosecutors to come to us in the interim? Are we going to?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. We will be able to start that model January 1st.
Okay.
And that will cut down on the time that you all are waiting for attorneys. It's going to cut down. We're going to shift responsibilities and even out caseloads somewhat, especially in the domestic violence realm. But there are a lot of changes that are going to come year 2 in structure of the office. Because, look, the last time that the model changed substantially was under Frank Briscoe in the 50s, right? And it might have worked for an office of 30 prosecutors, but we're pushing 400. We've got to reimagine a lot of this. And John Jordan and I worked pretty diligently at reimagining the office 2.5, 3 years ago, with the final piece being the homicide division. And then the administration that is currently there just grabbed the homicide division and didn't do any of the rest of the stuff.
And I'm glad you bring up the homicide division, because you just got the Chronicle endorsement pretty unequivocally on that. And
Enjoyed, it was a good read.
And I thought you might like that. But I was a little bit confused in how they wrote up your plans for the homicide division, because I certainly know you well enough to know you have some plans, but I wasn't sure that they did a great job of clarifying those. So what is your plan for the homicide division?
The homicide division, I think, is fabulous. I love the way that they're going through the cases. I think it is as well run as any division we've had in a while. I think Sarah Seeley is an amazing supervisor. We're going to keep the homicide division. I've been very intentional about talking to the powers that be that are still there, letting them all know everything's fine.
Yeah.
I think as we move forward, eventually I'd love to see the homicide division grow as we get more people. It's not something we're going to do Jan 1. But eventually, I'd like to see the homicide division grow. And what was kind of lost in translation with the Chronicle article is what we've got to do as the homicide division grows is be able to take some of the really good 12 experienced prosecutors that are up there and put them back in positions of teaching.
Yep.
Right? Not all of them, certainly, but we do need to be able to create the next generation of those, because they're up on 12, they're isolated, and they're like heat-seeking missiles, as they have to be. They're just going after capital murders, just one after the other after the other. It's fabulous. But we're losing all of that great experience that could be in some of the courts, helping the younger prosecutors understand just how to move a docket, understand how to try less significant cases. All of those things need to be changed. So that's not a Jan 1 change. Homicide division is just going to keep on plugging. But as we go forward and as we're able to grow it, I want to pluck some of the more experienced prosecutors so that we can put in less experienced prosecutors up there and give more experience back down to trial bureau, to other divisions and things like that.
So one of the questions that we had from Katie Farrell again is, do you, and I
get her another chair.
I know. She watches court TV all day. This is, she's like a cat lady. This is her life. But I think this is a great question as well, and I think it kind of talks about it plays into talking about the murder squad that you have there. Is that it seems to me under the Ogg administration that there have been promotions that have just been lightning fast. And I think that is really running out of gas in trial.
Correct.
How do you balance taking the best of your prosecutors and putting them in murder squad, but still fostering a level of experience with the prosecutors in the trial court on trying serious cases?
Yeah, I mean, that is the ultimate dilemma right now. It really is, because of the lack of experience. And a lot of that is going to my friends in other jurisdictions. As a Band-Aid, right? As a quick fix, getting some experience back in trial bureau, getting some experience back in other divisions, at not even the highest echelon, at division chief level, at district court chief levels.
Yeah.
Because over the last 8 years, we have hemorrhaged incredible talent, just at such a terrifying rate. You were talking last time we were here about how quickly we were making chiefs. It can't continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it took, when I was there, the average was somewhere between 6 to 7 years. And now you're
12.
You're seeing it in people in two to three.
Well, I mean, I was on the promotions committee. It was terrifying. We've made felony 2s with 2 total trials and then never having heard a one-word verdict, and we just hand them murders and ag robs and sex assaults.
And it's showing in trial.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say because he's going to make my job a lot harder, it sounds like. I'm not real thrilled about this.
But that's the debate, because, when I
do live in Harris County, and I have to sleep here every night, and my kids sleep there. So, I want there to be some competence,
Well,
law enforcement.
and I love Kent Schaefer to
I
death.
start charging higher fees.
I love Kent Schaefer to death, but one of his comments, when I was a big supporter of Sean in the spring, was like, "Are you tired of winning cases?"
Right.
And
Sounds
my
very
response to
Schaefer-esque.
that was like, "No, but I am tired of having to go to trial on cases that should have been
Right.
dismissed."
Yeah.
So
That's the key, at least for me, right? If we're going to go to trial on cases, we shouldn't win all of them because we should have the confidence in our office and in the leadership to try the hard cases. But we should also, and more importantly and more frequently, have the confidence to dismiss cases we know should be dismissed as opposed to just taking an L.
Right.
Right? And being able to dismiss them quickly once issues arise.
And that's another great segue. Kim Ogg released this database this week.
I think she called it a dashboard.
A dashboard, and I'm kind of curious about that because it's always, in my opinion, it's been the bane of my existence to think that statistics can be applied to cases to some degree because they're all different. But what are your thoughts on that and the usefulness of it and what you see the future of that?
So I have been on the campaign trail, so I have not gotten a chance to dig through it. My default answer is I think transparency in any form is better than what we're dealing with now, so I applaud that. Some of the feedback I've gotten is that the captions and the headlines may be needing to be tweaked a little bit. I just think in all, it may be the best utilization of the asset forfeiture money that she is spending in such an incredible,
Not saying much, but
incredible outlay going forward. But look, I want to look at it. I want to dig into it. I think that is where we're going as a profession. I think that is where I want to go as an office in taking a historically opaque profession and opening it up more so. The grin that you have right now is really kind of scaring me.
no, I'm grinning because Katie
Katie's got another question,
Katie
for
is dogging on me on that. No, on Facebook Live. No, but so that's another topic. Do you feel that right now Kim has made several high publicity expenditures lately? Do you feel that she's anticipating you being the next DA and trying to spend all your money before? Is this like Brewster's Millions for Kim? She's trying to get rid of it all by December 31st?
I mean, the short answer is absolutely, right? This is the same person who I'm still waiting on a call or a text conceding the race from March. This is a person who got beat by 50 points and decided to endorse Ted Cruz and go on a commercial while still calling herself a Democrat. This is par for the course. Someone who has never apparently cared about that office, right? If she did, the last year wouldn't have looked like it is. You wouldn't be trying to spin down to zero the asset forfeiture money. You wouldn't be treating the people in that office the way that she's been treating. And I think it is so patently unfair that she is having people send out emails to the young pre-commits and to the baby prosecutors saying that she has to fire 50 of them, knowing all the while that is patently false and she's never going to have to do it. She just loves to play these political games. And I, quite frankly, as a resident of Harris County, I cannot wait for her to be gone.
What are some? I mean, we agree that the dashboard is something that could be useful.
Sure.
What are some ideas of more productive ways to use asset forfeiture money that you see in the future?
Initially, I think that we should be collaborating with our forensic science centers, right? IFS and Houston Forensic Science Center. We still have rape kits that are backlogged. We can use that money to outsource some of those and get the tests done in a much faster way. We should be using that money internally to go recruit and have on-campus presences at the rest of the Texas law schools. We should be using that money, I think, to go scout talent at mock trial and moot court competitions around the country to start bringing in the caliber of prosecutors that we all experienced back when we started. We should be using that money for a lot of different things to make the job better and to make the job of seeing that justice is done happen faster. None of that's happening. The Girl Scouts are not helping us with that task.
We all like the Girl Scouts, but yeah. Now, when you start, do you foresee, based on Kim's behavior now, that in the event you win in November, that she's going to be cooperative with the transition team? Have you gotten any feel for that?
I've gotten some back channel information that it's not going to happen, that we're not going to have a smooth transition. I hope that that's wrong. I really do. I think for the betterment of Harris County, it's important for us to be able to get in there and really kind of have open access to make determinations. But whether or not that happens, we're going to be ready to go January 1st. I mean, most of my leadership is not new to that office. A lot of my leadership is currently in that office. So we're going to be okay either way. But I sadly don't think we're going to be very cooperative.
You have anything? Because I have another one. If you don't, I just don't.
Keep going.
So, well,
A little bit of a slow night tonight.
It's not the best color man in baseball for
I'm
nothing,
not a good
folks.
wingman tonight at all.
no, well, so to me, and I think this started with some degree with Lycos, and I think it's been just grossly exacerbated under Kim. But it seems to me, and I think this is just one of the biggest factors in our backlog in so much, is the lack of discretion given to your line prosecutors. How do you plan on restoring that? And how do you, I mean, because there is a balance. You got to make sure that you don't just hand the keys to the kingdom to someone who started that morning.
That's exactly right.
But what is your balance? How do you plan on working that?
And I do have something I want to add.
Oh, now.
So, yeah, now.
Okay.
So, and how do you do that without just becoming this massively slow bureaucracy?
Exactly.
Because so much attention gets paid in district court. I think county court needs a lot of attention as well. Kim Ogg came in and she had all these pretrial intervention plans, and they were great. She's implemented a lot of those.
Sure.
They have become just so tedious and bureaucratic.
Yep.
And it's just literally, it's not like I can get through. This is a person we're talking about. You know, they just like, I know. Just I needed this box checked and this box checked and this box checked, and then we're good. And I'm like, it's mind numbing sometimes. So how do you do what Murray's talking about without becoming like overly bureaucratic? More so.
So here's one of my big plans on this. And we are going to have whatever the name is going to be. I'm not good. I'm an idea guy. You know that, right? But it's going to be a chief of equity who's going to look at trends, not specific cases. You can't go back like the person we talked about in February, right? That killed the discretion when they were checking Berg buildings and UUMBs and the dispositions and going to talk. What we want to look at is the inequity of you land in one court as opposed to the other, for whatever reason, right? The judge, that chief, whatever that is. And I always use felon in possession as a good example, right? If in one court, routinely the offer is 8 to do on a felon in possession, and another one is gun class and dismiss. Those are both, that's not equality, that's not equity. Right. And so that's where you go in, I think, a very teaching manner, not in an accusatory way at all, and just say, hey, here's kind of what we envision as justice in this caliber and type of case. Each case is different. That's why our punishment ranges are so wide.
Right.
But here's what the rest of the county and the rest of the courts are doing. Here's what you're doing. This is more in line with what we think justice is on the run-of-the-mill, these type of cases. I think that's the way that you start to move the box slow, kind of tighter. You're never, I don't want it to be we're on top and we're telling you you have to plead this one to this, right? Or we don't do that, or you're offering too little on that. It's got to be a macro look. And I think with the prosecutors in there, when they understand that, like, look, we're wide latitude. And if we ever see one that is so out of the realm, then it's a quick question. It's not an accusatory thing. And it's what we all grew up with, right? If you can justify what you did, go back to work. So I think that's how we give it back. It's the only way that an office of this size works. Pure discretion. You know, every one of you takes the same oath. And you're right, it can't be, you just got your bar card yesterday, here's,
Do what you want.
here's
Do
a
whatever
bird
you
hat.
think.
Yeah, feel free. But I think as we continue with training and work through that, the office I envision and the office I want is one of teaching and one of training and one of building everybody up. And so I think in that vein, we're going to be able to do it without crushing the spirit of the office.
Well, I know the system that you were brought into was similar to the one that I was there, but where the chief of certainly of a district court, that basically that unless it was something super exceptional, you could defer to every single one of those chiefs and their judgment.
Period.
And that was what I always thought was the biggest flaw in Kim Ogg, was that she got rid of all those chiefs. She fired them.
She fired them.
And then replaced them with a bunch of people that didn't know that. And I think it seems to me that your goal has got to be building back that structure where you trust the chief to do what's right. End of story.
Right.
And how do you build that back? I mean, how many years does that take to build back after what she's done?
Certainly not one term.
Yeah.
I think we really need to look at the rebuild of this office, where my reelection in 4 years is a progress report, where we sit down, and I feel like I'll be back here a few times before then, but where we sit down and really assess internally and externally. All of these ideas I have, all of these things that I've worked through and talked through, they're not all going to work. I know that without a doubt, right? But we're going to try them. And when they don't work, we're going to modify and pivot. And there's no pride in authorship. There can't be in this. And it's the reason that intake began the destruction of this office, right? It's a actually good academic exercise. Does it make sense to do this? Well, we knew within 3 months it didn't, and we certainly knew within 6 months that it was an unmitigated disaster. And we're 7 years in.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the one thing that I can promise that I know I'm going to do is when things are obviously not working, we're going to pivot. We're going to change what it is. We can't just keep running our head into the wall and expecting something different. You like how I
did
merged the metaphors?
I like that.
Yeah.
We're mixing metaphors it's like we're watching Top Chef here.
How do you determine if a change needs to be made? I mean, how do you have that self-check on yourself? Because I gotta believe Kim doesn't think she's been doing a bad job, and that she's running her head into the wall over and over again. So how do you not run into the same pitfalls?
You listen to the people that you trust. You're the kind of leader that can accept criticism and not bite people's head off or fire them. And you don't lock yourself in an ivory tower with a bunch of yes men around you. That has to be how it is. It's what I've never done it. I have always been able to be told I'm wrong. Literally ask Murray. He tells me I'm wrong maybe once a week. But that has to be how you do it. And it can't just be internal, right? It can't be just your first assistant and your chief of staff and your bureau chiefs who are telling you things. You have to get out into it's why I think it's so important that I go work a docket a month. It's why I think it's so important to walk the halls every now and then, right? You've got to be out in the groups of people that you're affecting and get real feedback from people that you're not paying.
What about HECLA president? You can have regular meetings with whoever our elected president is?
I will commit to that on this show right now, that we will do that at least quarterly.
We'll see if we'll invite you, but yeah.
But okay. I think that is
We're going to his office.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I think the public defenders,
Sure, yeah.
the public defender, I think the president of the HCCLA, and quite frankly, the MAC. I think we should be having regular meetings because a lot of the issues that we are all going to be talking about are issues that we can work together to bring to the judiciary's perspective. We can bring to Commissioner's Court together. Right? I mean, I'm a huge advocate of the public defender getting bigger and getting more resources. I'm a huge advocate of working with the private defense attorneys to do this. My job is not to put people in prison. My job is to do the right thing, right? The job I'm seeking. And so I think it's better when we're working together when we can. I think we should have, we were talking about it off air, I think we should have, if not collaborative trainings, at least places and things where the younger prosecutors and the younger PDs and the younger private attorneys can actually interact in a non-court setting.
Softball game. We had to stop that during COVID. Before the COVID. We need to get that back again.
The DA's office is going to crush you guys.
We were just waiting for DeToto to age out of the league.
Yeah.
We'll bring Paul Doyle back. It'll be fun.
Get a ringer. So I actually, this is a topic shift. Earlier this week, Gerald Goins' highly publicized case was sentenced to 60 years, $10,000 fine. And I think that case had a really kind of weird place in the hearts and minds of the defense bar, because on the one hand, we definitely want cops accused of bad behavior to be held accountable, but also as defense attorneys, we were mortified by the absolute PR machine that Kim Ogg and that office generated. How do you feel about the level of hype that the Ogg administration, because this isn't even something that Lycos did. Nobody did anything even close to what Ogg did as far as hyping pretrial publicity, aggressively attacking enemies in the press, in the comment section. This one hits close to home for me. What do you feel about the role of the community outreach and the outcome of trials and talking about them in advance?
I think it's bad.
Next question.
Look, I think that community outreach in a DA's office of our size is crucial. I think it is so important when it's done for the right reasons, right? Getting out into communities that have historically been ignored, underserved. That's what I want my community outreach to be. I want to have people who don't know what the DA is to understand what it is. I think that is a long-term recruiting plan that is going to be very good for us. I want to make groups that are fearful of law enforcement less so. I think part of that is the way that we prosecute cases, but part of it is also just getting out into the community. The community outreach is not about going on the Chronicle comments section and naming judges and talking about them. Community outreach is not about trying cases in the media before you ever get to a court. It's just not that. And we're not going to utilize our community outreach organizations for that. We've got enough to do to not go out and attack people on the county dime.
Do you foresee yourself envisioning a policy about what can and can't be said about a case from an employee of yours that hadn't gone to trial yet? Because we used to, the level, and I left before you did, and then you came back. But some of the things that the DA herself, I would have assumed would have gotten me fired.
Agreed.
when I was there. Do you plan on having any type of structure on what can and can't come out of your office when it comes to pending cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I think absent some pretty significant circumstances, or unique circumstances in a case, if you're going to talk pretrial, it needs to be probable cause, or what happened that day in court. Like this was a reset.
Right.
We filed a motion to suppress. Yes, I think we're gonna have not only some pretty hard and fast policies on what can and can't be shared, but also if you're going to be in a position where you're going to go talk to the media, we're going to have, like we do with other types of training, some real training on how to handle yourself, how to convey what you want to convey without emotion and things like that. And I think that is so important to just the public and having them understand what we do.
Use some of that asset forfeiture money for community outreach.
Well, I'm not going to have any.
Districts
So.
need
Well,
bus drivers.
But I mean, there are ethical rules. I mean, we used to have Scott Durfee that would. I mean, it was part of when you had annual update with the Texas District and County Attorney Association. We would go, and that was usually one of the classes on what you can and can't say to the media. And I've just been astounded by just this PR war that Kim has tried, and to the point that it almost got comical. Like, you can't win in the courtroom, so you got to try it outside of it. And you know, I mean, we are Harris County, but I testified in goings on a change of venue that I've never seen anything like that. And it just seems that if the DA's office is just generating that, you know, I hope that one of the most things that I hope for a new administration is that that's gone.
I think you're probably right. It probably is a big factor if you can't win in the courtroom, win out there, and also maybe she's trying to hope that she can get the tail to wag the dog.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, ethics has never been a strong suit.
Yeah. Well. All right. So
There's just been a lot of bizarre things that have come out of there. I'm having a little trouble because I really want to kind of try to pin you down on January 1st. What changes would we see when we walk into a courtroom? And you know,
I don't know if you see any other than some friendly faces back. I don't know if you see any changes January 1st.
Okay.
I think you're not allowed at intake. It's a
Right.
It's a locked place. That you would see some changes.
We'll start seeing them January 7th, January 8th. Like,
January 1st, I'm probably going to be asleep because I'll have gotten
Right.
sworn in.
That's a-
But no, the structural changes, other than domestic violence bureau and where those cases live, those I think the amount of lifting that fixing intake is going to require
you may be right.
is what I don't want to do is come in and just fix everything at the beginning, because then nothing's going to get fixed right. I want to really make sure that intake is right. I want to fix intake. And then, you know, we've got a lot of different projects that we want to do, and so we're going to have to triage, and I don't think it makes sense to do everything at once. I think training is something that you're going to be able to see, but that's going to take some time to get in. You know, something that I've been talking about that I really, it's going to take agreement, I think, from HCCLA, from the PD's office, from the MAC, and especially from the judges. But what I'd really like to do is get a commitment that some week in February, we don't have any pending matters set. We effectively take a week where it's just PIA, it's just new cases, and the division chiefs and higher will handle those in court. And we have a full week of just intensive training where we're utilizing courtrooms, we're doing mock trials, we're getting law enforcement agencies to get up there and testify about things, and just running through and almost treating them like scrimmages. Because we've talked about it in February. I mean, just learning how to introduce a picture or a video are things that we're struggling with at levels at the office that we haven't seen. So we've got to get back to just the nuts and bolts of doing it. And I think if we can get the buy-in from the defense bar and the judges, we can actually do this, and it can be beneficial for everyone, where we co-train. It's like having the scrimmages in training camps where the other teams come in.
I mean, I see value in that. Because
Value
think.
for the DA's office.
Well, no, but I see value in it for us too, because think of how many times when you've got a prosecutor up there reading probable cause, like, well, he's got 5 dismissed assaults,
Right.
and like, you shouldn't be saying that, because the issues like that, I would love the opportunity to say, this is why we get mad at you, this is why we're talking bad about you on the listserv, things like that. I mean, I can see that you could do that without showing them your entire hand.
And that's what I'm talking about. Not specifically trials. We can do that by ourselves. I'm talking about decorum. I'm talking about, let's just run through a docket where we can all pause and say, and I think that is something that we would need before we have it. We'd have to get a curriculum of what we're going to do today, and that's got to be from you guys as well, right? I mean, you have to come in and say, here are the issues we'd like to work through. I just think that it could be beneficial for everyone.
We're definitely going to have to fine tune that.
Right.
Just like the
intrigued by
dashboard.
this. I want-
Yeah,
like
it's
the
interesting.
dashboard.
That was a curveball.
You're welcome.
Well, we are almost out of time. We have 1 minute. So tell us, what are our key voting dates? What do we got going on?
October 21st, first day of early voting. November 5th is election day. So
How long does early voting run?
until November 1st, I think. I think
usually
it's
the
roughly
Friday
Yeah, it's the
before-
Friday before the Tuesday.
Okay.
And so, get out there. You do it earlier than later. because
Don't wait. Yeah.
If you wait for election day, something's going to happen. It's going to rain. You're going to get flat tire. Just vote the 21st.
All right. Anything else you want us to know before we roll out of here?
Nothing. I will. After we win, I will be back here as many times as y'all will have me, and we will talk through issues over and over.
And once a quarter, you'll have an open door to the HCCLA president to come talk to you about
Yes,
spark concerns.
Even if it's mayor.
even if it's mayor. I mean, but I don't think it should just be at my office. I don't think I should just summon people.
Well, no, no.
So
yeah, we'll put-
we should be at different
you
places.
can bring the bagels and the coffee, and we'll just march
I like
in like
it.
we own the
I
place.
won't have any.
He wants free food, is what he said.
Yeah. Let's try to
All
work it
right.
out.
It's been a great show. Sean Teare, thanks for joining us. Justin, thanks for being
I was here.
host
Sat over here
extraordinaire.
and the table
Appreciate it.
moved away.
All right. Thank you all. And whatever you do, guys, remember to vote. We'll see you next time.